Megan Hines was 34 years old the morning her sister called to tell her their father was
Hey,
dead.
that
He
is
was
my
sitting 3 feet
bacon!
away from her,
You have
stealing
gotta
bacon
be
off her
fast.
plate. 6:30 in the morning, she put the call on speaker. "Sis, Dad died last night," Renee said,
Hi
cold
there,
as a
I
bank
am on my
statement.
way now.
"He left everything to me and my husband.
What do you
You get
want?
nothing." Behind her, Renee's husband
I'll
Colin
handle it
laughed.
right away.
"Finally, you're out." Megan's father set down his coffee, leaned toward the phone, and said something he wasn't going to repeat yet, because Renee didn't get to hear it that morning. She'd hear it exactly where she finally did. But here's what none of them knew. The funeral they were already counting money over was happening that Sunday, and Walter had picked out the flowers himself. Lilies. Ruth had hated lilies. He'd said she wouldn't mind missing this one. This is a story about family, betrayal, and justice done the right
on my
way
way now.
for everyone who's
See you in a
ever
few
been
minutes.
underestimated at their own kitchen table. 9 months earlier, in October, Megan's biggest worry was a night shift schedule. She was a registered nurse, working travel contracts out of Columbus, Ohio. 13 weeks here, 13 weeks there. Travel pay was how a girl from Millhaven killed off her nursing school loans before she turned 40. Her father thought the whole arrangement was hilarious. "You drive 3 states to give strangers their pills," he'd say, "and I can't get you to change my furnace filter." That was Walter Hines, 73 years old that fall. Army, 1970 to 1974. He came home, worked wood for other people until 1981, then opened his own shop, Hines Woodworks, out on Route 12, and ran it for 36 years. He sold it in 2017, retired at 65, and moved exactly nowhere. Same house on Birchwood Lane he and Ruth had bought in 1984 and paid off in 2009. He wasn't rich. He was paid off rich. Small-town rich. The kind that doesn't show up in a man's shoes but shows up later in a courthouse. Ruth died in March of 2023. Walter grieved the way he'd always worked wood. Quietly, daily, without asking anyone to watch. Every Saturday night he wound the little brass clock she'd kept on the mantel, because Ruth always said a stopped clock made a house feel dead. He cooked. He drove the 1978 F-150 he'd restored bolt by bolt. He called Megan every Sunday, and she called him. Everyone was fine. Then, on a bright October afternoon, 73-year-old Walter climbed a ladder to clean his own gutters, because asking for help was never going to be his best event. He fell 8 feet and landed wrong. Broken right wrist, the kind that needs a small surgery, plates and pins, 6 to 8 weeks of healing, not a tragedy, an inconvenience with hardware. Megan was mid-contract in Texas, and she still made it to the hospital in Millhaven inside 48 hours, because that's what you do. When she walked into his room, Renee was already there with flowers, her tears arranged as carefully as the bouquet. Renee's husband Colin was shaking the surgeon's hand like he was closing on a duplex. Colin sold insurance. He had a voice like warm syrup and a handshake he practiced. "You fly back to your patients, Megan," he told her, squeezing her shoulder. "Family takes care of family." At the time, it sounded like kindness. It took her months to hear it for what it was. A man assigning himself the keys. She did ask questions before she left. She was a nurse. Discharge plans were her native language. She asked to see her father's paperwork, his follow-up schedule, his medication list. Colin smiled and said it was all handled, all filed, all at the house. Renee said, "We've got this, sweetie. You're so far away." Walter, doped and cheerful in the bed, gave a thumbs up with his good hand. "Go on, kiddo. I'm surrounded by professionals." So she flew back to Texas. It matters later that she's honest about that. She didn't leave because she didn't care. She left because the 2 people standing closest to him kept telling her everything was handled, and one of them had already decided exactly how handled things were about to get. Walter moved into Renee and Colin's place that November, 15 minutes from his own house. Just a few weeks, they said, until the cast came off. And here is where the first paper appeared, the honest one. His right hand was in a cast. He couldn't sign checks, couldn't drive. So Colin brought in a notary, and Walter signed a limited power of attorney, bill paying only, with his clumsy left hand. That document was legal, reasonable, and boring. Anyone's parent might have signed one. That's what makes this kind of thing work. It never starts with a crime, it starts with a favor. Renee posted a photo that week. Walter at her kitchen table, soup in front of him. Blessed to care for my daddy. Family is everything. 200 likes. Half of Millhaven commented hearts. Meanwhile, on a Sunday call, Colin was walking Megan through their plans and referred to the house on Birchwood Lane, the one her parents had paid off, as the asset, dropped casually, the way you'd mention the weather. She noticed it. She even said, "You mean the house?" He laughed. Realtor brain. Sorry. Walter noticed things too, he told her much later. He noticed Colin brought the power of attorney papers to his bedside instead of the kitchen table. He noticed the pen was already uncapped. But his wrist ached. The pain pills made everything feel like a matter for tomorrow. And the paper said what it said, bills only. He read it twice and signed. It was the last thing they ever showed him before asking him to sign it. Then the wall went up, one polite brick at a time. Megan's Sunday calls started landing on Renee instead of Walter. He's napping. He's tired, hun. I'll tell him you called. 3 weeks straight, she did not hear her father's actual voice. His old flip phone broke, so she bought him a smartphone, set it up herself, loaded her number, shipped it to Renee's house. The package went missing. She shipped a second one with tracking. Delivered, said the email. Oh, that, Renee said. Dad didn't want it. You know how he is with technology. Her father had rebuilt an engine the year he turned 70. He was not afraid of a telephone. Something was off, and Megan knew it. She asked to talk to him directly. She offered to schedule a video call. She asked which doctor was following his wrist so she could call the office. Every time, the same soft wall. He's resting. We've got it. Why are you being like this? Here's the thing, nobody tells you about situations like theirs. When a grown man is legally competent and his caregivers say he's fine, a daughter 2 states away has no lever to pull. There's no agency to call because your sister keeps answering the phone. Megan was a nurse under contract, 13 weeks locked with loans to pay, and the only 2 witnesses inside that house kept smiling at her through it. Renee ended one call with a line Megan never forgot. You chose your career, Megan. Let the people who stayed handle it. She flew home for Christmas anyway. At that dinner table, her father's chair had been moved to the corner. Walter had just turned 74 that December, and the cast was off, but something else had been fitted onto him, a smallness. He sat in the corner of Renee's living room while she answered questions aimed at him. Dad, how's the wrist? It's healing great, isn't it, Daddy? He was thinner, quieter. His coffee was decaf, doctor's orders, though no doctor of his had ever said so. Megan got him alone for 10 minutes on the back porch, both of them pretending they needed air in 30-degree weather. He looked at her sideways, the old spark back for a second, and said, My checkbook's been on a diet, kiddo. Statements used to come to the house on Birchwood Lane. Now everything was paperless, and the passwords lived with Colin. He'd asked to see the accounts twice. Both times, Colin clapped him on the shoulder and said, That's what you got me for. Megan went back inside and asked Renee calmly in the kitchen if they could all sit down after the holidays and go over their father's finances together. Colin materialized like he'd been summoned. Family doesn't need lawyers, Megan, unless you're accusing somebody. Notice the move. She'd asked about statements. He'd introduced the word lawyers. Then Renee started crying right on schedule about everything she does, about how nobody appreciates the person who stayed. And Walter, because he is decent, and because decent men make soft hostages, patted Megan's arm and said, I'm fine, kiddo. Don't start a war at Christmas. On January 6th, Megan signed another 13-week contract in Texas. She'd signed a lot of paperwork in her life. That would turn out to be the most expensive signature of hers in this whole story. By February, the Sunday calls had gone from screen to scripted, and she'd had enough. She took 4 days off between shifts, told nobody, and flew home. Her little ambush of love. Renee opened her door, surprised, and recovered fast. Oh no, you just missed him. He's on an overnight fishing trip with the VFW boys. Bad timing, sweetie. Fishing in Ohio, in February. Megan drove to Walter's house on Birchwood Lane and stood in the yard a while. Grass gone shaggy under the frost, mailbox stuffed, curtains shut tight, a house holding its breath. On the way out of town, she stopped for gas and ran into Hollis Reed, her father's oldest friend, 75, who'd run the town funeral home for 4 decades before his sons took it over. He looked at her strangely. "Walter hasn't been to a post meeting in 3 months, honey. We figured he moved in with you." Not on a fishing trip with them, not at meetings at all. She called Renee from the gas station lot. Her sister didn't even pause. "Oh, it's not the VFW crowd, it's his other buddies. You don't know them." A lie stacked neatly on a lie, like cordwood. Megan flew back to Texas with her stomach in a knot. 3 days later, Renee texted her a photo. Walter in an armchair, smiling thinly, holding that day's mood hostage. "Dad's doing great. Stop checking up on us." She stared at that picture a long time. There was a detail in it, small, ordinary, right there in the background, that she wouldn't understand for another 5 months. When she finally did, it changed how she saw every photo Renee had ever sent. Megan's contract ended the first week of May, and she came home to Columbus with a plan: drive to Millhaven unannounced, and refuse to leave without seeing her father. The phone rang before she'd unpacked. Dana Whitfield, a nurse she'd worked med-surg with years ago, 58, sharp as a lancet, the kind of woman who notices everything and forgives most of it. She'd taken a job at a long-term care facility called Fairview Pines, out near the state line, 170 miles from Megan's kitchen. Her voice was careful. "Megan, there's a resident here. Came in back in March. He asks every nurse on every shift if they know a nurse named Megan. Says she's his daughter." Megan couldn't speak. Dana kept going, gentle, professional. "His name is Walter Hines, honey. Is that your father?" Megan stood in the middle of her kitchen with her keys still in her hand. Nobody had said the words nursing home to her. Not once, not in any call, not in any text. As far as she'd been told, her father was eating pot roast 15 minutes from his own house. Dana said one more thing before hanging up, and it's the thing that put Megan in the car. "He doesn't present like a placement, honey. He presents like somebody misplaced him." She didn't call Renee. She didn't call Colin. There are conversations you have by phone, and there are conversations you have in person, in daylight, with paperwork. She got in the car. Fairview Pines sat off a county road, behind a sign with 2 burned-out letters. Inside, the smell hit first. Cheap disinfectant over something older. A call light blinking down the hall with nobody moving toward it. A television talking to a row of empty chairs. Megan counted staff the way she counts on every unit she's ever walked. 1 aide for a wing that needed 4. The medication cart, parked and locked at 11 in the morning. The 9 o'clock meds still signed out as pending. Her father had been living in this building for 10 weeks, while her sister posted about family being everything. He was in a shared room at the end of the East Hall, second bed by a window that didn't open. Walter Hines, who had once carried a lathe motor across his shop floor out of pure stubbornness, was maybe 15 pounds lighter, gray stubble on his jaw, wearing a shirt she didn't recognize that fit him like a borrowed apology. But his eyes came up when the door opened, and his eyes were his eyes, sharp, whole, present. He looked at her a long second, and what he said first broke her worse than tears would have. "Took you long enough, kiddo. They told me you knew. Told me you signed off on it." They hadn't just hidden him from her. They'd hidden her from him, telling each of them the other had agreed to all of it. They spent an hour untangling 7 months of careful lying, and every knot had the same 2 sets of fingerprints on it. His flip phone hadn't broken. Renee took it, to protect him from scam calls. Megan's smartphones never reached him. He'd never heard about either one. Her letters, she'd sent 4, never made it past whoever collected the mail. Back in March, Colin had told him they needed him out of the house for 2 weeks, while they repaired the guest room floor. The 2 weeks came and went. When Walter pushed, Colin's answers got shorter, and then one day the answer was a hallway at Fairview Pines and a roommate named Gus who yelled at the ceiling after dark. Through all of it, they'd told him Megan knew, that she was too busy, that the nurse couldn't be bothered with her own father. He'd kept a torn corner of an envelope in his wallet with her old cell number on it, in pencil, the only number they couldn't cancel. But the hall phone required staff to dial out, and staff at Fairview Pines were a rumor. Megan did what she does. She asked him the date, the month, the president. She had him count backward from 100 by sevens, just to see him roll his eyes at her. It's Tuesday, I'm in a purgatory, and your quiz is easier than one of Colin's insurance pitches. Sharp as ever, nothing wrong with her father's mind, and that fact was about to matter enormously. Then he glanced at the door, lowered his voice, and said the sentence that turned her worry into something colder. Kiddo, whatever paper they used to put me in here, I never signed a second one. Megan walked to the front office with her RN license number ready and her nurse voice on. The administrator was a tired man with a tie the color of oatmeal, and he recited the script he'd been handed. Only the responsible party could authorize a transfer, and the responsible party was Colin Ashford, who held power of attorney. She asked one question. Does Mr. Hines have a diagnosis of cognitive impairment on file? Dementia, incapacity, anything? Silence while he clicked. There wasn't one, because none existed. Walter had been admitted as a voluntary placement on paperwork submitted by his POA, with a vague letter about needing support with daily living. A competent adult is not a package in storage. He can discharge himself, full stop, she said so politely. Then, because the tie kept opening and closing his mouth, added, or we can call the long-term care ombudsman together and walk through the intake file, page by page. I have the afternoon. It's remarkable how fast paperwork appears when you offer to read it with a state official. 20 minutes later, Walter sat at that desk and signed his own discharge. Right-handed, heeled, unhurried, letters carved clean. The W leaning left the way it has since 1974. First thing I've signed in 6 months, he said to the room, and it's a jailbreak. Dana hugged him at the door and tucked a sleeve of cookies from the staff room into his jacket like contraband. The facility would notify the POA by certified mail. Fine, Megan said. Mail takes days. On the drive home, somewhere past the county line, Walter watched the fields peel by and said quietly, They think I'm filed away, kiddo. Let's not correct them just yet. Megan set her father up in her apartment in Columbus. Couch pulled out, blood pressure pills refilled, real coffee, caffeinated, doctor's orders be damned. Then they went to a bank branch together because Walter Hines was still the account holder of record, and an account holder is entitled to his own statements. The printout was 11 pages. He read it the way he used to read a diagnostic report on a wrecked engine. Slow, twice, no cursing. In 5 months, from November through March, $187,000 had left his accounts. $46,000 of it labeled care expenses for a man eating instant potatoes at Fairview Pines. $89,000 wired to something called CA Holdings LLC. She could guess whose initials those were. $52,000 to a loan servicer attached to a condo in Florida that Renee and Colin had bought in 2022. At the top of the market, $25,000 remained. A working man's whole quiet fortune gone in a season. And stapled behind the statements a courtesy copy of something worse. A home equity line of credit application on the Birchwood Lane house, $150,000, pending approval, signed Walter Hines on April 14th. On April 14th, Walter had been 170 miles away, asking nurses if anyone knew his daughter. Megan called Renee that night. One call, one chance. She kept her voice level. Tell me your side, I'm listening. What Renee said back told her everything about where her heart had gone. You were never really in this family, Megan. Don't you dare lecture the one who stayed. So they stopped asking family for answers. They hired a woman whose entire job is paperwork. Patricia Marsh, elder law, 61, reading glasses on a chain, a handshake like a filing cabinet closing. Her office smelled like toner and lemon drops. She listened to the whole story without moving, then said the sentence that made Walter fall professionally in love. Documents don't cry, Mr. Hines. That's why I like them. She moved fast and completely legally. First, Walter signed a notarized revocation of every power of attorney in existence, delivered to the bank, the county recorder, and every institution he'd ever touched. Second, a signature dispute letter to the HELOC lender, which froze that application where it stood. No money had moved yet, which meant the house was still clean. Third, a report to Adult Protective Services and a fraud affidavit with the bank, both of which start clocks that even a smooth talker can't stop. Then Patricia laid out the problem. Civil recovery, I can get. Criminal intent is harder. He'll say Walter authorized everything verbally. These men always say that. And buried in the bank's file was the thing they didn't have before. A second power of attorney, full financial authority, notarized January 12th, submitted in January. The one Walter never signed. Patricia slid it across the desk. For criminal charges, it helps enormously if they use a forged instrument again. Somewhere public, somewhere witnessed. Fraud in a drawer is a lawsuit. Fraud performed for an audience is a conviction. Walter studied that page for a long, quiet minute, the loops of a signature that wasn't his, over his own name. Then he looked up and asked Megan to bring him his Army discharge papers. They drove to Millhaven on a Tuesday morning, when Colin would be at his office selling somebody a policy. Megan's key still fit the back door of the Birchwood Lane house. Some oversights are gifts. Inside, the air was stale in a way that insulted him. The file drawers in the den hung open, picked over. Ruth's suitcase sat unzipped on the guest bed, her good jewelry box empty beside it. And on the mantel, the little brass clock stood dead at some long-gone afternoon because no one had wound it in 7 months. Walter stood in the middle of his own living room like a man visiting a museum of his life. 7 months, he said. The house doesn't even smell like mine anymore. Then he went to the bedroom and knelt, slow but steady, and pulled his old Army footlocker from under the bed, still locked. The one thing in that house Colin hadn't cracked, because to a man like Colin, an old soldier's box is just furniture. Inside, in order, squared away like it was 1974, his DD-214 discharge papers, his true signature inked when he was 22, the original deed to the house, his medals, wrapped in a handkerchief, and a letter, envelope soft with handling, marked in Ruth's round hand, for Walter, when I can't say it myself. He didn't open that one there. He carried the whole footlocker to the kitchen, set it on the table where every big decision in the family had ever been made, and laid the forged power of attorney down next to his discharge papers. 2 pieces of paper, side by side, on a kitchen table in a house they'd both been about, 52 years apart. The signature on the DD-214, 1974. The W leaning hard left, like a man walking into wind, ink pressed deep. He signs like he means it. And then the signature on the second power of attorney, dated January 12th. Round, even, polite. Every letter behaving prettier than Walter ever wrote. Even before the wrist, he said, tapping it. I never wrote like that, but handwriting wasn't the knife. The date was. Megan had already pulled his medical records. He'd signed a release, making her his healthcare contact the day after the jailbreak. And on January 12th, Walter had been at the orthopedic clinic from 9 in the morning until 11:30, having hardware checked under light sedation, initialed in by a medical assistant at every step. The notary stamp on the power of attorney said it was executed at 10:15 that same morning at an office 20 miles away. A man cannot be sedated in one town and signing in another. The paper didn't just lie. The paper told on itself. Walter sat back, and something in his face settled. Grief clocking out, a decision clocking in. Dead men don't sign papers, he said. Megan asked what he meant. Their notary friend stamped a ghost, kiddo, so let's introduce them to a real one. Then he opened Ruth's letter at last, and read it alone by the window. When he came back to the table, he only shared one line. Don't you let the quiet ones fool you, and don't you dare go quiet yourself. The certified letter from Fairview Pines landed in the Ashford mailbox that Friday, and Megan's phone started detonating before noon. Colin, voicemail 1, syrup gone, all vinegar. You have removed an at-risk senior from a care facility without authorization. That's kidnapping. Kidnapping. A man who sells insurance quoting law is a dog quoting the mailman, but he'd learned the vocabulary. Voicemail 3 threatened an emergency guardianship petition. Walter was confused, declining, being manipulated by a daughter after his money. Read that again and appreciate the craftsmanship, accusing the other side of the exact crime in your own pocket. Patricia was serene. Guardianship requires an independent medical evaluation. Your father will pass it like a driving test. But she didn't sugarcoat the rest. A contested guardianship takes weeks, gets loud, smears everyone. And here was the real play. It buys time. Time for a frozen HELOC to thaw if the dispute hiccuped. Time to move what was left. Men like Colin don't fight to win. They fight to keep the clock running while the money finds the exits. That night, Renee sent one text. No greeting. Dad will choose us. He always needs the ones who stay. You've got a career and an empty apartment. He'll figure out which daughter actually built a life around him. Megan read it to Walter because they'd agreed. No more secrets managed on his behalf, by anyone, ever. He looked at it, then out the window, then said, in the mildest voice imaginable, "She thinks staying close to a man is the same as standing by him." He handed back the phone. Call Hollis. Tell him I finally need that favor he's owed me since 1976. He laid it out at Megan's kitchen table at 9 that night. Over decaf he'd poured himself as a joke. They need me incapacitated or dead to finish this, he said. Guardianship's their incapacitated play. Slow, public. So let's give them the other option, the one with better catering. Megan laughed, then saw his eyes and stopped. He meant it. Let them believe he had died. Not a fake death certificate, not a false report to any agency, not an obituary in any paper. He'd thought about the lines and refused to cross them. No government paper, no insurance, no cops lied to, just one phone call, friend to family, and a memorial his buddies threw him. Lying to liars isn't a felony, kiddo. I checked twice. The logic underneath was pure Patricia, even though she'd never touched the theatrics. Greed is a reflex. Tell Renee and Colin the man is gone, and they will not pause to grieve. They will produce that forged will and claim the estate in front of God and everybody, because they cannot afford probate questions later. Using a forged document in public, out loud, to witnesses, has an ugly legal name, and it comes with handcuffs. They wouldn't be trapped by Walter and Megan. They'd be trapped by their own paperwork, doing exactly what it was always for. Megan sat with it, and her old habit spoke first, the one that thinks she's responsible for every outcome in every room. If this goes sideways, you're the one they'll call crazy. They'll use it in the guardianship. He nodded like he'd already been there. I've been called worse by better. Then he smiled, and for a second he was 50 again. We just need a man the whole town believes. Lucky for us, I know the fella who buried half of it. Hollis Reed listened to the whole plan on his back porch, coffee going cold in his hand. When Walter finished, Hollis was silent about 5 seconds, which for Hollis is a filibuster. I've buried 4 mayors and 1 man I truly didn't care for, he finally said. This will be my first rehearsal. That's how the old guard says yes. Hollis had run the town funeral home for 40 years. His sons ran it now, but nobody in Millhaven would question Hollis Reed calling with sad news, which is exactly why he'd be the one to make the call. One call, only, personal, to Renee. Her father collapsed, and he was gone. Every word deniable as a misunderstanding between old men, nowhere near an official. Dana's part was even cleaner. If anyone phoned Fairview Pines asking after Walter Hines, she'd confirm only what was true. Mr. Hines is no longer with us here, and let a guilty imagination do the heavy lifting. The VFW would host a memorial gathering that Sunday, organized by his Post brothers, the way they've done for every one of their own for 60 years. And Patricia would know nothing about any theatrics, officially or actually. She'd simply attend a community memorial as a guest, the way small-town lawyers do, with her briefcase, because she never goes anywhere without it. If certain documents happen to be waved around in public, well, she'd be there with the real ones. Hollis asked one final logistics question. What flowers? Lilies, Walter said. Ruth hated lilies. She won't mind missing this one. Thursday, 7 in the evening. Hollis made the call from his porch, with Walter and Megan listening on speaker 3 feet away. Walter attended the announcement of his own death with his arms crossed, like a man auditing a repair estimate. Hollis's voice did the thing 4 decades of practice does, that soft, settling tone that has carried bad news up 1,000 front walks. "Renee, honey, it's Hollis Reed. It's about your father. He collapsed this evening. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry. He's gone." Then they all heard it. The pause. 3 full seconds. And into that pause, Renee did not say, "Where is he?" Or, "Was he in pain?" Or, "Oh God, not Daddy." Her first question breathed out over what Megan will swear was relief. Where was he staying? Was anything with him? Papers, I mean. Papers. Walter's face didn't move. His hand did, knuckles whitening around his coffee cup. Just once, then easing. Some griefs a man absorbs standing up. Hollis, bless him, never broke stride. The Post brothers would handle everything, he said. A memorial Sunday at the VFW Hall, no cost to family. As for papers, well, he supposed some lawyer somewhere had whatever there was. Bait floated gentle as a fly on a stream. Renee said thank you, in a voice already 3 rooms away, doing math. She did not ask to see her father. She did not ask a single question about him, only about what he'd left behind, as if the man were packaging. They found out later, from phone records, what happened 23 minutes after that call ended. Colin dialed the HELOC lender's office line at 7:41 that night and left a voicemail asking about disbursement timelines. Grief has a schedule, apparently. His runs on business hours. Which brings us back to where it started. Friday, 6:30 in the morning. Megan's kitchen in Columbus, bacon in the pan, her father across the table stealing it. The phone lit up. Renee. She put it on speaker and set it between them, next to the coffee. "Sis, Dad died last night. Flat. Not one tear in it. He left everything to me and my husband. You get nothing." And Colin, close to the phone, wanting to be heard. "Finally, you're out." It took Megan a second to understand what that call actually was. Renee wasn't notifying her of a death. She was serving an eviction. From the family, from the estate, from the story. Before Megan could ask a single question about paperwork, the claim came first. The claim always comes first with them. Walter set down his cup without a sound. He leaned in toward the phone, close enough for the steam off his coffee to fog the screen, and he said something. Quiet, level, final. Renee hadn't heard it yet, because Megan's thumb had been resting on the mute button since she'd answered. They'd agreed the trap needed 2 more days in the ground. What he said was for Sunday. She'd hear it standing up, in front of everyone. So will you. Into the live line, Megan made her voice small and said she needed time, that she'd come Sunday, to the memorial. Renee's last instruction before she hung up. "Fine, but don't you bring some lawyer to a funeral, Megan? Have some class." They gave them Saturday, and they spent it exactly like themselves. By 9 in the morning, Renee had posted a black and white photo of Walter to Facebook. "Rest easy, Daddy. Your girl was with you till the end." A heart emoji. 200 reactions by lunch. Casseroles pledged in the comments. Candle emojis from women who'd known Ruth at church. With you till the end. The end of what? His checking account. And here is where Megan finally understood the photo from February, the one texted with "Stop checking up on us." Same armchair, same wall behind him, and on that wall a clock reading 7 minutes past 4, the same 7 minutes past 4 as in the new memorial photo. The same shirt on Walter in both. Every proof of life Renee had ever sent came from one afternoon. One staged sitting, cropped and reserved for months, like leftovers. He'd been gone from that house since March. Her photographs never knew it. While Renee posted, Colin worked. A neighbor on Birchwood Lane, an older woman who'd watched that street for 40 years, called Megan, confused. A van in Walter's driveway. A man drilling out the locks. Saturday, before any funeral, changing the locks on a dead man's house before they'd even buried him. Patricia added the timestamp of that call to a folder that was getting thick. Dana reported in too. Someone had phoned Fairview Pines, asking for records for the estate. The estate. The body wasn't even cold, mostly because it was at Megan's kitchen table, eating a BLT. Walter took it all in calmly, then spent the evening polishing his good shoes and hanging his one dark suit on the door. Every man should look sharp at his own funeral, he said. Sunday came. 60 folding chairs, one closed casket, and Renee walked in wearing brand new shoes, carrying a folder. The VFW hall on a Sunday afternoon, flags at the front, the honor board with its brass names, 60 folding chairs in rows on an old wood floor that creaks confessions out of everybody. Hollis had dressed the room like the professional he is. A casket at the front, closed, borrowed from the showroom floor. Nobody questions a closed casket at a memorial, because nobody wants to. A photo of Walter in uniform, 1972, cocky as sunrise. And lilies. God help everyone, lilies everywhere. The whole town came. Post brothers in their caps, Birchwood Lane neighbors, Ruth's church circle with foil-covered dishes for after. Dana slipped in at the back. Patricia sat in the corner, briefcase on her knees like a house cat bothering no one. Walter and Megan were in the storage room behind the stage, through a side door, sightline through the hinge gap, close enough to hear chairs creak. Megan's job was to stand in that dark with her folder of true things and keep her breathing even. Her hands were cold, his weren't. Renee entered like a widow in a picture, black dress with tags freshly off, new shoes, tissue at the ready, crying precisely when observed and recovering the instant she wasn't. Colin worked the room in his best suit, gripping shoulders, accepting condolences, like deposits, a folder of his own tucked under one arm. They took the front row. At 2 o'clock, Hollis stepped to the little podium, cleared his throat with ceremony, and said the sentence the whole trap had been built around. Before we share our memories of Walter, the family has asked to say a few words about his affairs. They'd requested it themselves that morning, lambs volunteering for the spit. Colin took the podium the way he takes everything, like it had been holding his place. He gripped both sides, bowed his head a beat for effect, and began. Walter was family, and family honors a man's wishes. Then he opened the folder and produced it. Cream paper, blue backing, a document with weight. Walter had a will drawn up this past April. In it, he leaves his home on Birchwood Lane, his accounts, and his truck. Everything, to his daughter Renee, and to me. Signed April 20th. The room made a sound, not words, wood. 60 chairs shifting at once as 60 spines straightened. Heads turned toward each other down every row, because everyone in that hall had heard Walter Hines brag about his nurse kid for 3 decades, and this arithmetic did not add up to the man they knew. Colin should have stopped there. Colin has never once stopped there in his life. He raised a hand for quiet, found Megan's face in the crowd. She'd slipped out to stand at the back wall minutes before, per the plan, and read the next line slowly, tasting it. And to my daughter Megan I leave nothing, for reasons she knows. For reasons she knows. He read a dead man's cruelty to a room full of that dead man's friends, and he smiled while he did it. That smile is the most expensive thing that man has ever worn. In the corner, Patricia's thumbs undid the clasps of her briefcase without hurry. And at the podium, Hollis leaned toward the microphone, gentle as church. April 20th, you said. Strange date for a signature. The side door clicked. Let that door hang open one moment because there's a beat that belongs here. Saturday night, near midnight. Megan's kitchen. The plan spread out like an engine gasket set. Megan's old habit had one last run at them. We can still just hand it all to the police Monday, she said. Clean, quiet, no stage. Walter was quiet a while. When he answered, he wasn't sharp about it. He was almost gentle. Renee said, "You get nothing. Let's see what nothing looks like when it stands up and walks." Then he told her the real reason, the one under all the strategy. Kiddo, they didn't steal my savings. Savings can be rebuilt. I built them once with my own 2 hands. They stole my say, told the town I needed storing, told my own girl I didn't want her, told me my own mind couldn't be trusted. A man's say is all he's actually got at 74, and I'm taking mine back, in front of everybody they lied to. That was the whole war in one paragraph, standing in a kitchen in his undershirt. So they agreed on the rules of engagement. His rules: no shouting, No accusations from them, no speeches. Megan would carry the folder, statements, revocation, medical records, his discharge papers, and they would stand there and let paper do the talking, because paper had been the weapon from the start. And there is a justice in being beaten by the real thing. Sunday afternoon, 2:17. The hinge gap went bright. Walter's hand turned the knob, and 60 people were about to attend the shortest resurrection in Ohio history. The side door opened, and Walter Hines walked into his own memorial service. Dark suit pressed to a knife's edge, shoes like black glass, the VFW pin on his lapel catching the hall lights. He didn't hurry. Walter Hines has never hurried for anyone, and he was not about to start for his own funeral. One measured step, then another, the old floor announcing each one like a drum roll it had been saving up for 60 years. The room came apart in slow motion. A casserole dish slid off a side table and hit the floor with a crash nobody turned to look at. One of the churchwomen crossed herself twice and sat down hard. Somebody's oxygen tank whistled. In the back, Dana lost the fight entirely and barked one clean laugh before clamping both hands over her mouth. A neighbor said loudly, to no one, "Well, I'll be damned," which, as far as anyone knows, was the first time in her life. Renee did not scream. Renee stood up and simply stopped operating. White as the lilies, 2 black tracks of mascara moving south, while the rest of her face forgot its lines. And Colin froze at that podium with the forged will still raised in his right hand, at shoulder height, in full view of 60 witnesses and 1 lawyer. A salesman photographed mid-pitch by every eye in the room. Walter reached the podium, adjusted the microphone downward with 2 fingers, the way he used to true a table saw blade. He looked at the casket. Nice box, Hollis. Little roomy for my taste. Then he turned, found Colin's eyes, and delivered it mild as morning. Dead men don't sign papers, son, and they surely don't drink coffee. Colin did what every cornered salesman does. He started selling, loudly. This is a sick joke, he said, his voice cracking across the hall. The syrup boiled off, nothing left but the burn. He's not competent. Look at him. This is elder confusion. He wandered off from his facility. He's been manipulated by her. His finger found Megan at the back wall. She took him. She's after the money. This is exactly what the guardianship was for. It's a remarkable thing, watching a man drown at a podium. 60 people had just seen Walter cross a room like a colonel inspecting a parade ground, and here was Colin explaining that the man was lost and confused. The room did not murmur agreement. It went quiet, in the specific way an audience does when it has stopped being an audience and started being a jury. Renee lunged the other direction, for sympathy. "Daddy, we thought," Hollis said, and then she spun on Hollis, her mask slipping sideways. "You lied to me, you called me, you said," and there it was, in her own voice, in front of everyone. She'd been told her father was dead, and never once asked to see him, never called the funeral home, never asked what happened, just booked a podium and found a folder. Megan walked up the center aisle, unhurried, and folded her sister against her chest, keeping her voice at the level she uses for families in waiting rooms. "You were told he collapsed. You called me at 6:30 the next morning, about the will. You never asked to see him, not once." Behind her, the pastor of Ruth's old church stood, took his coat, and moved 3 rows away from the Ashford family pew. The room was choosing. Then Patricia stood up, buttoned her jacket, and spoke for the first time. "Mr. Ashford, may I see that document you just read to the room?" What happened next took 11 minutes, and it was the most anyone had ever enjoyed paperwork. Patricia walked to the front table, the one meant for the guest book, and laid out documents one at a time, announcing each in the tone of a woman reading a weather report. Notarized revocation of all powers of attorney, executed in May, on file with the county and every bank that matters. Orthopedic clinic records, January 12th. Mr. Hines under light sedation, 9 a.m. to 11:30, staff initials at every stage. A power of attorney, notarized, allegedly, that same morning, 10:15, at an office 20 miles away. A man cannot be under sedation in one town and signing in another. Bank records, $187,000 in 5 months, including $89,000 to CA Holdings LLC. She looked up pleasantly. The C is for Colin, the A, I assume, does not stand for accountable, and a home equity application on the Birchwood Lane property, signed April 14th, when Mr. Hines was residing at Fairview Pines, 170 miles from the closing pen. Then she turned to the will itself, still in Colin's hand. Dated April 20th, when your father-in-law was residing at Fairview Pines. Intake logs show he received no visitors that week. So tell the room, Mr. Ashford, who witnessed this will. There were 2 witness signatures on that document. One belonged to a loan officer from Colin's own office, and that man was sitting in the 4th row, a casserole on his knees, come to pay respects. He went the color of oatmeal. You told me it was routine estate stuff, Colin. You said it was a formality. His voice cracked in front of everyone. A witness to the forgery, unwitnessing himself live. Colin made his last stand. Nobody consented to being recorded. You people set me up. Patricia, mildly, no one recorded anything, Mr. Ashford. You read it into a microphone at a funeral you scheduled speaking time for. That is when the hall doors opened, and 2 deputies from the county sheriff's office stepped in out of the afternoon light. Exactly on the schedule Patricia had arranged with the fraud unit 3 days before. Nobody got tackled and nobody got cuffed in front of the lilies. Real life is quieter than that. Honestly, quieter is worse. The older deputy said the sentence that ends a certain kind of man's whole architecture. Mr. Ashford, we'd like you to come answer some questions regarding a bank fraud report and some documents. You could watch every mask Colin owned land and fail in 10 seconds. Outrage, this is a family matter. Charm, gentlemen, there's been a huge misunderstanding. Let's talk offline. Nothing. And then the last mask, the real one, the beggar. His voice went up. Walter, I'm family. I was going to pay it all back. Every cent. It was an investment. I was growing it for you, for your retirement. Walter looked at him the way he used to look at an engine somebody had lied to him about. Calm, diagnostic, a little sad at the waist. You had my checkbook for 7 months, son. The only thing you grew was my funeral. The hall did not laugh. It exhaled. 60 people, 1 breath. The sound of a town closing a ledger. Then Renee broke, and this part has to be told straight, because she's still Megan's sister. She dropped into the front row chair like her strings were cut, and for one moment, the performance stopped, and the actual woman looked out. We were drowning, Daddy. Barely a voice at all. The condo, the cards, all of it. Colin said it was temporary. It was only ever supposed to be temporary. Megan believes her. That's the tragedy. It probably did start as temporary, the way a leak starts as a drip. But nobody stays sympathetic for long on that side of the room, and Renee proved why in the very next breath, wheeling on Megan, her wet face twisting. But you made it worse, Megan. If you'd just stayed out of it, nobody ever had to know. There it is. Not I'm sorry. Not what did we do. Just, we'd have gotten away with it if the family nurse hadn't checked the chart. Megan looked at her big sister, the one who taught her to ride a bike, who curled her hair for prom, who'd called at 6:30 in the morning to tell her she was nothing, and gave her the calmest sentence in the whole story. You called before sunrise to tell me I get nothing, sis. I'm the only one leaving this room with everything I walked in with. The deputies moved. Colin went up the aisle between them, still explaining interest rates to men wearing badges. Walter stepped to the microphone one last time, put his hand flat on the borrowed casket, and addressed his own funeral. Folks, I apologize for the dry run, but you needed to see it. Not because I'm special, because next time it's your house, your kids, your papers. Check them while you're still above ground. The pastor said, Amen, at a memorial for a living man. It remains the proudest church moment of Walter's life. The parking lot after, gravel, late sun, 2 county cars. The deputies were settling Colin into the back of the first one. He was asking about his phone call before the door even shut, already drafting his version. Renee walked to the second car under her own power. Nobody was arresting her that afternoon, but they had questions, and her new shoes kept catching in the gravel. That expensive click gone stumbling in a rhythmic. Something about that sound is filed in Megan's memory forever, under the word consequences. At the car door, she stopped and turned around. For the first time that entire day, through the announcement, the will, the resurrection, all of it, Renee looked at their father instead of at what he owned. Walter walked over, took his time like always. He stopped about an arm's length away, and he didn't raise his voice, didn't sharpen it, didn't perform for the crowd drifting out onto the steps behind them. He simply said to her, at last, out loud, the thing he'd said into a muted phone at Megan's kitchen table on Friday morning, at 6:31, with the steam coming off his coffee. "You buried the wrong man, sweetheart." That's it. That's what he'd said, his thumb an inch from Megan's mute button, and what he'd saved 2 days to deliver in person. Renee's mouth opened. Whatever was supposed to come out never reported for duty. The deputy closed the door with that soft, terminal, government click. Through the glass, from the other car, Colin was still going, muffled, urgent. Lawyer, misunderstanding, Walter. Megan stepped up beside her father and gave Colin back his own words. At the volume you'd use for a toll booth. You were right about one thing, Colin. Somebody's finally out. The cars pulled away. Hollis appeared at Walter's shoulder with 2 cups of the church lady coffee and surveyed the emptying lot with professional satisfaction. Best service I ever ran. 10 out of 10, would bury you again. Walter snorted, unpinned the lily boutonniere Hollis had insisted on, and laid it on the casket as they wheeled it back to the van. Give these to somebody who's actually dead. I've got a house to unlock. And that is how Walter Hines attended his own funeral, cleared his own name, and still made it home in time to watch the evening news, which for once had nothing on him. They unlocked Birchwood Lane that same evening, a locksmith of their own choosing, invoice and receipt, because in this family, they keep records now. Walter walked straight past everything Colin's crew had pawed through, went to the mantel, and wound Ruth's brass clock first thing, before he'd even taken off the suit. The tick came back. The house started breathing again. And so, Megan thinks, did he. Here's the ledger, because it's earned. Colin was charged with 2 counts of forgery, the power of attorney and the will, plus theft from an elderly person and falsifying a loan application. The state licensing board suspended his insurance license within the month and revoked it by fall, which in his industry is a death certificate nobody holds a memorial for. CA Holdings LLC was dissolved by the receiver. Between the bank's fraud restitution and the clawback from the LLC, Walter recovered 141 of the 187,000 they took. The HELOC application died frozen. The house was never touched. Patricia moved everything into a living trust, with locks Colin couldn't pick with a law degree, which he also doesn't have. Renee took a plea. Her attorney was smart, and her tears were for once in front of the right audience. 3 years probation, restitution on a schedule, and 300 hours of community service, which the judge, who possesses a sense of humor drier than Walter's, assigned her at a nursing home. She empties bedpans on Saturdays and reads to residents whose families don't visit. People ask Megan if she's forgiven her sister. She'll tell you what she told Renee through the glass partition at the county probation office, 8 weeks later. Renee looked smaller there, no mascara to run. She asked, flat, "Did you come to gloat?" And Megan said no, and meant it, and slid an envelope across for the officer to pass through. A copy of Ruth's letter, the one from the footlocker. At the bottom, under Ruth's handwriting, Walter had added a line of his own, in pencil. Your mother said don't go quiet. That part was for you too. Pay it back, then start over. Renee read it twice. Something moved in her face that Megan hadn't seen since before Colin. What happens to it from here is hers to work out. What Megan said through that glass was a boundary, not a bridge, and she gave it word for word. When the restitution's paid and the counseling's real, you know my address. Until then, you get exactly what you offered me at 6:30 that morning. Renee nodded. Understood the terms. First honest transaction they'd had in years. As for the rest of them, Walter is back at the VFW every Thursday, and he and Hollis started something that's turned into a small legend in the county. A monthly talk at the Post called Papers While You're Breathing. Two old men, a folding table, free coffee, teaching people their age how to read a power of attorney, how to spot a signature that's too pretty, how to make sure the will in the drawer is actually theirs. 11 people came the first month. By the third, they were setting up extra chairs, and a woman from 2 towns over stood up and said the talk had caught her nephew mid-scheme. Megan took a staff position at a Columbus hospital. No more 13-week states. Every Sunday she makes the 2-hour drive. And Walter burns the bacon on purpose, because he claims she likes it that way. Turns out presence isn't a debt you pay off. It's a habit you keep. The brass clock ticks on the mantel, and in his wallet, where the torn envelope with Megan's number used to live, Walter now keeps one pressed lily. "Best funeral I never had," he says. Walter taught his daughter that the measure of a man was never the number in his account. It's whether his say still stands while he's breathing, and whether the people who love him would rather guard his signature than inherit it. That's the story. One phone call at 6:30. One forged signature. One old soldier who attended his own funeral, standing up.